Welcome to Edison TV. We're joined today by BioVersys, a Swiss-based biopharmaceutical company focused on the development of novel antibiotics. We're going to be speaking with the company's founder and chief executive, Dr. Marc Gitzinger. Marc, thanks for joining today.
Hi, welcome.
So, Marc, you've had some strong news flow recently. Before we get into it, could you maybe cover off some of the most recent progress?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Yeah, we had a really great start to 2026, advancing the entire pipeline actually, but the big news flow was certainly that our lead asset, BV100, which we develop for very severe hospital infections, got the FDA green light for its Phase III trial. And based on that, and since that, we obviously reported already first patient, first visit. So we're super excited to get the trial really off the ground with patients, and that's huge progress. Besides that, also our second asset in the clinical stage development, alpibectir, we developed that together with GSK. And also here we could report that the first part of the Phase II trial has finished. And that was the first time that we tested that molecule in combination with the first-line drug regimen. And here we could report that the trial is progressing into its next phase. Alpibectir proves to continuously be safe and well tolerated, and really behaves as we would hope and expect. So all of that was really strong news flow, and we could also get some of that science published really nicely in the New England Journal of Medicine. So 2026 can continue on that track.
Fantastic. So diving in now to some of the clinical programs in more detail, the Phase III BV100 trial is now up and running. Could you just recap for us maybe the trial design, the key endpoints, and then what the expected timelines are?
Yes. So basically, the Phase III trial is called RIV-TARGET, and we develop our drug BV100 for very severe hospital-acquired pneumonia and ventilator-associated pneumonia caused by a gram-negative bacterium called Acinetobacter. The trial design is really for regulatory approval. It's a global Phase III trial aligned with the US FDA, with the European Medicines Agency, and also the Chinese NMPA. It's a pretty large trial. We have overall 100 sites roughly in approximately 15 countries. And obviously randomized controlled trial, blinded for us, and it's randomized to today's standard of care as by treatment guidelines.
Excellent. So the China bridging study as well has also recently been completed.
Yeah.
Could you recap for us why that was so important for the company, and then maybe touch upon the commercial opportunity in China?
Yeah. So overall, we developed BV100, of course, already in multiple Phase I trials to really characterize the drug, that it's suitable for these ICU patients. And China was important to have that small bridging study, as it is required for the human PK exposure in the Chinese population. So we just finalized that, and this allows us now to onboard later this year China into the Phase III. So it was a very important milestone, and China is important in, I would say, any global development strategy, but particularly in anti-infectives. It's a very large population. Drug-resistant infections are generally at a very high level in all of Southeast Asia, including China. So in our line of business, it's a market that we cannot ignore, and it's also really the patients that are in need for these new drugs.
I see. So 2026 is set to be a really important year for the lead candidates. Beyond the Phase III program, there's the Phase IIb, and some DSMB reviews expected throughout the year as well. So could you just recapture for us what the investor focus should be there, and what would constitute meaningful outcome from those events?
Yeah, I might first comment on this Phase IIb that you mentioned. That trial is called RIV-CARE, and it's maybe a little bit unusual that a company does that in parallel to the Phase III, because we already had a Phase II with very good outcome. So you wonder why we do this again. We're not repeating exactly the same, but we're going into countries of very high unmet medical need, again, Southeast Asia focused. And we run this trial with a different control arm, meaning best available therapy, allowing doctors more flexibility. And that's what they often like to see when they are in the adoption phase later in commercial stage, on how to decide which new antibiotics they should take. So we thought that rather than waiting until full approval and doing that as so-called Phase IV trials, we actually put that forward.
Sure.
Now, the beauty for investors is there's really a couple of things here. Besides that, we really anticipate it will drive commercial uptake. This trial is an open label trial. So we are allowed to see the data and can actually report at interim levels. So, at a recent or a decent amount of patients recruited, we can actually report how the data looks there. And I think it's super important and very indicative of, is the Phase III going in the right direction? Because if anything, the patient groups that we will recruit in the RIV-CARE trial in the Phase IIb are even more severe. So if we see good effects there, I think it's fair to assume that it translates well into the Phase III. The Phase III is blinded. So you mentioned DSMB reviews, Drug Safety Monitoring Board reviews. We'll get these updates, of course, but as the name says, Drug Safety Monitoring Board, this is mainly related to is the safety acceptable and good, and can the trial continue? And that's all we will really learn from those. But it's updates, and we're happy to keep the market appraised of this progress as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So taking a step back now, we've certainly seen that the sort of crab infection space has seen a renewed interest amongst pharma and biotechs. So it'd be really helpful to understand from you how you see the competitive landscape, and then how your drug candidate might maintain that competitive edge.
Yeah. So maybe we start to explain a little bit what CRAB is. That's carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter infections. This pathogen is categorized today by multiple organizations around the world, including the WHO, as the highest unmet medical need, because with today's available treatments, so all antibiotics that we have on the market, it's the least treatable, actually. So that describes the unmet medical need. Logically, if you have such a high unmet medical need, I think there's interest for developing drugs against it. And that's a good thing, because we really need a few different options and answers to treat these infections. It's great to see companies like Roche, large pharma, jumping into this again and developing. We have another couple of smaller biotechs as well involved in that space. We are at the moment, from the competitive landscape point of view, the only company in Phase III at this stage. And then we had one competitor that got an approval already 2 years ago in the US, and in the meantime also in China. It's a good product. Very happy, but it doesn't answer all of the resistance problems that we have, particularly in Southeast Asia, but also in the US, the rising numbers of so-called metallolactamases. That's in a nutshell a bit the competitive landscape. We feel extremely well positioned there, particularly since you have to always consider that physicians, by guidelines, are asked to use 2 different antibiotics to treat these severe infections. So coming really from different angles, attacking the bacteria to prevent, ideally, new resistance development.
Excellent. So BioVersys clearly has a great track record for partnering assets. It would be great to learn a little bit more about how the company chooses to prioritize those for partnering versus internal development. And then following on from that, if you could touch upon maybe the commercialization strategy for BV100.
Yeah, that's a loaded question there. Look, I mean, we have a very long-term partnership. Maybe we start with that one first. In our second pipeline asset called alpibectir for tuberculosis, it's in global health. And here we work since a very long time with GSK and are super happy about this partnership. It's working greatly, and it really shows the strengths of both partners going together after a disease that affects literally millions of people around the globe. BV100, so far we decided to progress alone because it's our lead asset. We wanted to move rather quickly. Yeah. We partnered with support for development in terms of financing. Wellcome is financing this RIV-CARE trial, for instance, via clinical trial network of Advanced ID. So this we did, but we wanted to capture so far the upside, mostly on our side. We have made another deal in partnering in 2025, mid of the year. And that was on our very early stage pipeline asset called BV500 for non-tuberculosis mycobacteria. And one of the drivers for the decision there was that overall we're still a small team. Obviously our focus has to be on creating value in the Phase III, but BV500 is an extremely promising and really potentially very big asset, actually. So that drove us to see what we find, and we had already interest for this asset, and then we progressed, by saying, look, wouldn't it be beneficial to keep the speed of development? by onboarding a partner. And we then found with Shionogi, the Japanese pharma company, one company that we feel is really the right partner, because they are very dedicated in the space, anti-infectives. They understand development in those indications. And so far, I think we have proven right, because the partnership is going very well. You also asked about the commercialization.
Yes.
There's a lot of change happening in the antibiotic space for commercialization, which is related to reimbursement. And these reimbursement reforms, change a little bit the playing field and what small biotechs could do or could not do. And the example is that UK, for instance, has a so-called subscription model, meaning there's an annual base fee being paid for actually delivering the antibiotic to the country, where you have revenue without sales force and a lot of the marketing activities, etc. And Europe recently also decided to give so-called transferable exclusivity vouchers. In a nutshell, these vouchers are anticipated to be worth around 150, 200 million. And that's a very good kickstart in your commercialization strategy in terms of capital to build capacities. And this changed also a little bit our thinking. We believe that certain geographies we could actually tackle ourselves. I think we have always been clear and outspoken that China, we would look for a partner, for instance.
Fantastic. Marc, that's been highly insightful. Thanks very much for joining today.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a great discussion.
If our audience would like to learn more, we refer them to the Edison website, where our research on the company is freely accessible. Thanks.